All right, welcome back. So we're going to now talk about D3. D3 stands for Data-Driven Documents. What that means is D3 allows us to take very boring data, such as Excel documents and so forth, other data sources. We take those and make beautiful visualizations, such as these visuals as you can see here. All right, there we go. So we take what is raw data and we make them into driven documents that are visually beautiful. In order for us to start using D3, this JavaScript library, we have to understand HTML, we have to understand JavaScript, as well as CSS. So essentially, all of the basics of web development, we must understand those concepts so that we don't have a hard time with D3. At this point, if you've been following us through this entire course, you should have HTML, JavaScript, and CSS under your belt. If not, you can either go back to the previous sections, or you can go and get other resources, other courses that deal with HTML, JavaScript, and CSS. Very nice. So let's go ahead and start looking at D3. All right, so if you go to Google and say D3JS, so just D3, you should see these results here. So what we're going to do is let's go to the first one that says D3.js and D3js.org. Click on that, and that should take you to this awesome, beautifully crafted website. So this is the D3 website. So this is where we are going to play more often. Now you can see here, everything here is built. So you can see right away, the moment you get there, we have at the top here overview, we have examples, documentation, source. So, but the cool thing is at first glance here, you can see there's a lot of goodness that's happening here. Now, most of this may not make sense at this point, but that's totally fine. The beauty of D3 here is because as a JavaScript library, it has everything pre-built for us. So the things that we can do with D3, in fact, let me click on one of these. You can see these are actually examples of things that have been created using D3. Maybe not the best example. Let's see. Let's find something exciting. How about this one here? All of this was created using D3. The beauty, right? Now, the beauty of having a JavaScript library or a library, generally speaking, is that a library abstracts out all of the hard work, per se. This is to say that all that we can do with D3.js, this library, we can do ourselves with JavaScript. However, that will take a lot of work, right? Because we will have to really, first of all, understand JavaScript, and then we have to do a lot of work just to create something like this, okay? So that is the beauty of using a library and the beauty of having D3 to create beautiful visualization with our data. So you can click anything here. You can see that they have amazing graphics, amazing visualizations that have been created with D3. Also, you can see they even give you the HTML. Now look at that. We have our HTML tag. We have then script tag, which then uses JavaScript here. Okay, so all of this, you notice, is prepended with D3. So D3 is the object that is the library we're going to be using. Okay, very good. And you can see it looks a lot. In fact, it is a subset of JavaScript. So it's a library was done or created using JavaScript. That's why they say it is a JavaScript library. All right, so what I want you to do for the next videos is to explore this website. Now, I don't expect you to understand everything. Like if we go up here, we go to documentation. That is not the idea, but the idea is to get you familiarized with D3 documentation. Okay, so they even give you introduction, API references, and all sort of things here. And at the bottom here, it tells you how to install, which we'll do that in the next video. And so, all right. Very good. So you can come back. Let's go back here. You can go to source. You can go to examples again, which is a better representation of what we just saw. Now, all of the examples are lined up here. You can see at any point, you can click, let's say, that one there. Look at this. All of this is done using D3. Very, very amazing. All right, so play around with this, go through all of this, take your time so you can hopefully feel all wired up. You feel excited about what you're going to be learning and looking forward to building amazing visualizations. All right, so let's go ahead and set up D3 in our project here so we can start putting things together here. Let me get rid of all of this. This is old stuff. Get rid of that div as well. So we have an empty file here. It's a project. Go ahead and create an HTML project. And what I did is I named it Boots Tester. So go ahead and create an HTML project, name whatever you want, and create an index file as I did there. And while we're here, I'm going to go ahead and create another file here, say new file. Let's call this app.js. Okay, very good. We have app.js there. And now it is time for us to connect this project here, this index.html, to D3. Like I said, D3 is indeed a library. So if we go back to our page, d3.org page here, you can see at the bottom, they show us ways in which we can actually connect D3 project to our project. Now there's two ways. There's one way which we can just take, as you can see here, there is the script. We can copy this and go to our project inside of our head, put it there. Okay, that's one way. Now this way here says that every time we run our scripts, every time we run our HTML, it's going to go and hit this link here, right? Now this also implies that we have to be connected online. So if you know for sure that you will always be connected online while you work on this course or work on your project, this is a good idea. However, there's another way which I think is a bit preferable because it doesn't require you to be online or have an internet connection. Okay, the other way is very simple. If you go to this link, http d3js.org/d3.v5.js, notice that it said v5 here. That's the current version of D3. Let's go back here to see. It says here that download the latest version 5.7.0. Now, as of recording of this video, this is the current version. Now, if you're watching this maybe 6-7 months or a year later, this could be different, and that's totally fine. Okay, I like to always go with the current version, and you should do the same. So going back here, you go to our link here, so d3js.org/d3.v5. If we are already on v6, of course, you're going to put v6.js, okay? So what this does is it gives us the entire library. Look at our handle there, okay? This is the library that constitutes our d3js code, all of this. Somebody had to go and write all of this, or a group of people, so that we don't have to write all of this. Okay, so what we're doing here, you can now go ahead and select all and say right click or just say copy like that. Okay, another option is to actually create this file internally. So what I'm going to do here inside of my project, I'm going to right click, say new file, and I'm just going to go and say d3.version5.js, something like this. Okay, hit enter. Now we have it here, so I can go ahead and paste it all in there. So now we have the actual library in our machine. As you can see, look at this, 16,000 lines of code. So don't change anything here. I'm going to save, and I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that so that I don't accidentally do anything strange there. So now we have our D3 version 5.js locally. That means what I can do now here at the top, I'm going to copy this. Now for source, I don't have to go directly to this link. I can just go and link up to D3. There we go. v5.js. Make sure that the paths are correct, meaning if we had added this D3 on a different folder, then you would have to navigate to that folder in order to get that. Okay, at this point here, I don't have to do anything. I can just go ahead and comment that one out because we're going to be using the local version of D3. Okay, so I will leave that to you, whichever you want to use. Just remember, if you use this first option here, that means you must be online while you work on a project, because this is the link where we can find our D3. Otherwise, if you use this option, doesn't matter if you're online or offline, it will still work because it's all inside of our machine. All right, very good. So now that we have our D3 done here, so I'll do something real quick so we make sure that everything is working fine. So we have our D3 added here, and what I'm going to do here at the bottom, because remember, everything is read from top to bottom when the browser hits our HTML. That means now it's customary to actually add the script that we want. In this case here, let me go put source. So this is the script where we're going to be writing the app.js we're going to be writing the actual D3 code, because this is the library, remember? So we need to have, say, app.js like that, right? This one here, this is where we are going to write our D3 code. All right, very good. So inside of our body here, I'm going to give a div, and then I'm going to just go ahead and put a paragraph, say hello there. Let me go ahead and put a span. Keep saying another hello. Let's save that. You should see that we have hello there, another hello. So nothing out of this world. Move that there. Okay, very good. Now, the power of D3 lies on many things, but the main thing is that, as you know by now, when we use JavaScript, in order for us to select the div or any elements inside of our body here, inside of HTML, we have to do some work, right? Remember, we would have to do something like this: document dot either use select, or we can get element by ID, and then we pass here, let's say, ID my div, assuming that we've added an ID to this div here, my div, like that. Okay, and then we will have to go and say something like get attributes or whatever else we want to do. Okay, so it takes a lot of work, but with D3 we don't have to do that anymore. In fact, because remember, we are inside of index here, we have our library already referenced, and we have at the bottom here our app.js, which is referencing our JS file where we're going to write our D3 code. We are able to say just D3 like this and say dot, and I can say select, and just like that I can say select P, I say style, and I can say color brown, like that. If you save this, come here, look at that. Hello there, change the color to brown that we want. So now it's very simple because we're using D3. If I want to select all of P's, all of paragraphs, I can select all. I can say select all like that. Save that. Notice now, I don't have another. Let's change this to P like that. Save. You can see now all of the P's, all the paragraphs have turned indeed brown, right? Very, very, very nice. So this is a very small fraction of D3, of course, because the main focus here was to make sure that we are set up to start learning about D3. But as you can see, it's really easy. All right, I will see you in the next video. So let's talk about SVG. Well, SVG stands for Scalable Vector Graphics. Now, the reason why this is important to understand, or at least to talk about, is because D3 creates visualizations using JavaScript, right? These visualizations are actually much connected to scalable vector graphics, because the scalable vector graphics allows us to create shapes that don't lose quality if we zoom in and zoom out. And also these files are very small as compared to PNGs or JPEGs and other image formats that are out there, which means also they make it very easy to load in our system. HTML file essentially will have divs and other ways of laying out the actual website, right? SVG is very important to D3 because it is indeed the container for D3. So everything that we're going to be drawing is going to be inside of an SVG container. Now, the reason why SVG is the best candidate is for the reasons that I said before. It is a canvas that allows us to draw shapes in such a way that it also conserves the quality of those shapes that we create, which is very important. Here's an example of a PNG and a SVG logo. A PNG is just a normal bitmap or normal image. Now here's an example. If I go ahead and zoom this in, you can see that the quality starts to change as we zoom in, right? It starts getting pixelated and doesn't look that great because now we're losing the quality. Okay. However, if we go here and look at the quality of this image here, right? If I'm going to make it bigger, you notice it doesn't pixelate because the quality is still reserved as it should be. So that is one of the main differences between a PNG or a normal bitmap and a SVG file. All right, let's go ahead and see how can we put together an SVG tag inside of HTML. Obviously, this is not how we're going to do moving forward, but I just want to show you just so you know. Okay, let's create a container here. So we're going to go ahead and say SVG and close like that. So there we go. We have our SVG element. Now, the cool thing about it, it's just like any other element, right? So if you save this and go back to our web browser here, by the way, I made sure to comment this out in our app.js here, right? Because I just want to show something real quick. If you go back here, nothing is showing. However, if we probe into our inspect and let's go to elements, you can see now, let's open here body. You can see now that we have our SVG element. If you highlight it, it tells us right away that it has 320 or 300 by 150. Very cool indeed. And the great thing about this, because it's just an element, an HTML element, if you will, you can also add some attributes here. Let's say I can say style to style this. I can say background dash color. And I can say, let's go ahead and say brown like that. If you save this, you will see now we have our SVG container. So this SVG, like I said before, it really is just like a block, such as a div and other blocks we can create in our HTML. So this indeed is where we can add all sort of things, draw all sort of things inside. All right, very cool. So if we don't put any style here, it's still going to be there as you saw before, because we can go to body and we can see our SVG container showing up there. Now, SVG itself, the object SVG, has several methods for drawing paths, boxes, circle, text, graphics, image, and so many things. Okay, so what I'm going to do here, so let's go ahead and play around with this a little bit so we can see. Let's see how can we draw a circle. Well, the first thing we can do here, I'm going to get rid of this style and I'm going to go and say give it a width. This SVG could have a width as well. I'm going to give it a width of, let's say, 100, and it will know we're talking about 100 units. Okay, so I'm going to say height. Let's give it about also 100. Let's save this so you can see real quick what's going on. You notice we still have it inside here. You have an over, you see width 100, height 100, and there it is. You can see at the top here, right? So inside now, I can go ahead and say, for instance, circle like that. Look at that. So for circle, we need to add CX as one of its attributes, if you will. So CX, I'm going to put 50. All right, I'm going to CY, I'm going to put also about 50. And then I'm going to say R for radius of our circle is going to be about 40. All right, let's save that and see what's going to happen. And voila, look at that. Now we have our circle. Now let's go and dissect this a little bit here so we can see what's really going on. Well, when we say circle, so we're creating our element circle here and we're adding a few attributes, if you will. So when we say CX, we're saying what is this X value in the coordinates. Now, one of the things that is very important to understand is that when we talk about computer graphics, the coordinate is actually upside down than what we already know of. Meaning, if you look at this very simple example here, this is how the computer graphics coordinates is laid out. Meaning this point here is 0, 0, meaning the X is 0, Y is 0. And this 0, 0 here would be, for instance, in our view here, window view, will be at the top, this corner here, which I can't even really demonstrate. Okay, that means in this case here, if I want to say CX is 3, means we go right 3, okay, and Y is also 3, as this diagram shows, that means we go down 3. So this would be the middle. That's the reason why if I say, for instance, CX 50, so the center is going to be 50, it's going to go to the right about 50 here. And it's also Y 50, it's not going to go up Y as we would do with our coordinates, right? It's going to go down 50, somewhere about here. So that will be the middle of our circle. That is the reason why we see it here. That means it went 50 this way, X, and then Y 50, which is going to be about there. So it's going to be in the middle here. So that is what we're doing here. We are indeed creating the center of our circle, because a circle has to have a center. And then we say we want the radius. Well, the radius is the distance between the middle to the end of our circle. So that means from here in the middle to any direction, it's going to be 40. Okay, so that's So that's what's happening here. And you can see if I change the X to 150, what do you think is going to happen? Is it going to move to the right or left? Let's save. Right. So you can't see anything here. Why is that? Well, the reason why is because, well, the width of our canvas is just 100 and height is 100. So if we put 150 here, it's going to be somewhere to the right, far from what we can see. Because remember again, let's go back to our inspect here. You can see when we inspect, let's open up there. Okay, when we inspect, our visible area, our canvas per se, it's that small. You see that, right? So we moved it to the right where we are not going to be able to see it because it's not the visible area for our SVG. Right? You want to see if I go back and say, for instance, 10, you're going to see it. Of course, you're going to see. Now it went all the way to the left. You see it's a little bit over half that it's showing. So if we go back here and I put 200 for the width, I can go here and say it's 150. We should be able to see it. There we go. And if we open down here, let's go to our SVG. It's right about to the end of our canvas. Now, this concept is very important to understand, especially the concept of our coordinates, how it all works in computer graphics. Because now we're talking about computer graphics, right? Because we're drawing things onto the screen. Always remember, the Y goes down, X goes to the right. Okay, so it's almost like if you take this Y and put back up, like as we would always see, that would be what we are accustomed to in mathematics and so forth. All right, so 0, 0, remember, is always the top left corner. And if you go down, the Y numbers will increase. If you go to the right, the X numbers will increase. All right, very good. So let's see. There are other things we can add. Of course, we can say, for instance, that we want stroke to be yellow. You can see, let's go back down here. You can see now our stroke, maybe it's too small, there is that yellow you can see there. Very good. What else can we do? Well, we can keep going here, add other attributes here. I can say the stroke dash width, it's going to be about 4 units. Make sure that we have the actual spelling. There we go. Now you can see it's pretty big. It looks like the sun or eclipse has happened. We have unintentionally created an eclipse. How fun. All right, so we can keep going here. Let's say, what else can we do? We can go ahead and say fill, right? That means the inside color, we can say it's going to be yellow. All right, now the sun is back. Very good. So there's a lot of things we can do with SVG because remember, we create the canvas first and we can add certain attributes or properties such as width, height, and many others. Okay. And inside, that's where we can create the actual forms, the actual graphics, if you will. In this case, we created a simple circle. The circle takes the X and Y, but you have to say CY and CX as you can see there. And you have to pass the R for radius. In this case is 40. So the smaller this is, let's just put a 4. You can imagine that our circle will become smaller because the radius is indeed smaller. Put back, save, and there we go. So in this video, we're able to create a circle in SVG. Now, if you're more curious about SVG and you want to learn more about SVG elements and so forth, if we go to developer.mozilla.org, so MDN web documents here, this is a good place to be. We can come here and you can search for SVG like that. And I usually go to this link there, and at the bottom here says, let's see, SVG documentation on MDN. So click that. And it will give you exactly what SVG is and all of the information that you may want. And it looks like even Google Maps is created using SVG. Why do you think that is? Go back to what SVG is and you will realize the reason why it's used in Google Maps and so many other technologies. What we're mostly interested in here is this SVG element. So if you click here, you can see there's a lot of elements that we can use with SVG. Right? We use circle, click there. Oh, look at that. It looks almost the same. right? Very cool. So you can add other things with SVG, such as viewbox, as you can see here. You pass 0, 0, that means 100, 100, right? Width and height. And you can pass an XML, so to point to the w3.org SVG namespace. And of course, you have that circle that we created earlier. Now, this is another way of putting it, right? What we did with circle. If you look back, as you can see here, we did not terminate it the way they showed in that example, like this, right? But not a huge difference. You can do either way, that works. Very good. What else? So there's other things you can look at by clicking here. Clip path. If you click here, it tells you exactly how to do that. So once you have a handle of this, creating SVG graphics directly in HTML, you can see that it's not that hard and it gives you a lot of flexibility, as you saw so far. However, you notice this is not the way we want to create our graphics using D3. Like I said before, D3 actually uses SVG as its canvas, where D3 actually starts writing into the SVG for obvious reasons. So it was just to kind of let you know, show you that you can actually do inline. And sometimes you may want to do everything inline as we did here. But the power here is that we can then use SVG elements inside of our app.js, which is our D3. And that's what we're going to be doing in the next video. All right, so we have now the SVG that we learned earlier. We can actually do the HTML inline SVG, as you saw here. But like we said before, this is not very efficient, because as we start creating complex graphics and so forth, using this method here, it can only take us so far. All right, so what we're going to do actually is I'm going to get rid of all of this. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a div, and I'm going to give this div a class name of Canva, like this. And there we go. So we have our div and we call class name Canva as such. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to our app.js. Remember, this app.js is connected to our HTML, which previously we added our D3 v5.js library. So this is our D3. All right. So that means here, wherever we write here, it's going to obviously manipulate our DOM here. So how do we then get or select our Canva here so we can start doing things with the tree? So previously we talked about how to do selection of our HTML elements in JavaScript. So we would have done something like this: constant, let's say A, for instance, and we would have to say document.query selector, and we would pass, in this case, a class name Canva, like that. Right? But with D3, we can do the same thing without having to go through all of this. We can just go ahead and say const, instead in this case. I'm going to say B is equal to D3 dot, I can say select, and look at it. I can pass the Canva class like this. Very good. So let's go ahead and log these two here. So I'm going to say A and B and see what's going to happen. If you save that, let's go ahead and open up our, perhaps make this to the bottom again. Let's go to our console here. The moment you do that, you can see the selection that happens. So it went ahead and got our canvas, there you go, and we have our selection there. So if you click here, you can see the first selection went ahead and got our A, which is the selection of our Canva div. But the second selection has something else, something more. What this is, the reason why we have this selection here is because this is now wrapped into D3. That means we create a D3 that select and it wrapped it with our D3 library. So this B here, this variable, it's not just any variable. It is indeed a D3 wrapped object, which means it gives us all of these other objects inside of it, meaning that now we have a group and we have a parent. We'll talk more about this, but for now, I want you to know that every D3 object has a group. And you can see in that side of group, we have this div.canva, which is exactly what we got here in HTML, right? Everything now is organized in an array, as you can see here, and has the first element, which is a div Canva, and it has all of the properties of that element. Ah, very nice. So there is a difference. So when we do this way, just to go straight to the DOM, well, we get the div class. Now, when we do this way, because now we're talking about an actual object, an actual D3 object, which has other things that we can do with, then we have this selection object, which contains arrays or a list of other objects, such as group and so forth. That is a main difference now that we have. So in this case here, we have B as the canvas. So that means now we have selected this div here, right? We put in this variable. In fact, we can just change this to Canva and get rid of this because we won't need that anymore. Okay, well, just to show you a little bit. So we have our Canva that is wrapped into D3 selector. What we need to do now is to add an SVG element to it. Because remember, we need to have an SVG element in order for us to start adding things into our canvas, right? So SVG in this case element is going to be our canvas. So we can do the same thing what we did earlier by actually writing HTML SVG elements by hand, but we realized that it's not the best way to go about. We can do that easily with D3. And how would we do that? Well, simply we can go ahead and say we have our canvas now here. So I can create another constant and I'm going to say SVG is equal to what? I'm going to use canvas. In fact, this should be canvas. And I can say dot append. And what is it I'm going to append? SVG, just like that. If you save this, all of a sudden, nothing happens. However, let's go to our elements. The moment you look at our elements, you go inside our div, voila. Now we have the SVG that was injected by D3. So we did exactly what we done before, except now we are doing it straight with D3, which is JavaScript. Very, very cool. That means now that we have our SVG, we can add certain things. I can go ahead and say, for instance, SVG, say attra or attribute. Notice the moment you do that, you will get these code snippets here. Now, what I did to get this code snippet that kind of helps us to write code faster is very simple. So you go to our extension here and you just say D3 code snippet, right? Mine is already installed, so that's the reason why it doesn't show the install button. So what I want you to do is to go ahead and install it. You probably have to restart the editor and so forth. But that kind of helps as you code. It gives you the hints that you need so that you can actually write code faster. All right, so go back there. So attra or attribute, we can add attribute just like we have been adding for our HTML or anything else. So attra like that. Enter. So for the attribute, there's two parameters that we pass. The first is going to be the attribute type that we want to add. So in this case, it's going to be width. I can say I want width to be something like 800, like this. I put too many there. Let's get rid of this. Save this. What's going to happen? Let's go back to our console there. Look at this. Now width is 800. Very nice. And you can see now it spans all the way to the right. So if I want to make it smaller, obviously, let's say 500. Inside of canvas, it's 500. It's a lot smaller. Okay. To add another attribute, I could keep going here. I can say dot attra. And what is that I want to add? I can add height as such, and it's going to be 250. Save. Down to our Canva. And there we go. We have height 250 with 500. Very good. So it is indeed working. Other thing I can do, I can actually put this on other line. So what we're doing here is method chaining. But remember, because we created this SVG at the top here, this variable, which will have this canvas, and we appended the SVG, we could actually put all these attributes inside of this line here as opposed to have to do this, right? To simplify our life, I can just come here, say dot, or get rid of this attribute there and just add a dot out here like this. This will also work. Okay, and I like to indent so that way it's easier to read and you can see that this chaining here pertains to this canvas or this variable. Again, if you go back down here, if you save, you can see things are still great. Everything works just fine. So now that we have our SVG, I can come down here and say, for instance, SVG variable dot append. Let's say I want to create a circle again. If you save, come down here, let's see. You can see inside now we have this circle, which is indeed empty, right? And of course, we can go ahead and add a few attributes as well. I can say dot attra, And I can say, for instance, CX is going to be 34. And as we know already, I can come down here and say dot attributes again. CY is about 34 as well. Dot attributes, attra. And I can say R about 50. You can see there it is. Now, it's not very nice because it's cut off and all this stuff, but it is indeed okay because at least we know it is working. Okay, so all of this, we've done this before, haven't we? Now, let's change this CX maybe a little bit more to the right, 130 like this. There we go. Maybe the Y value, so CY, about the same thing. So now it's right at the bottom here. So we'll have to go down. In fact, maybe change this to 100 so that we can actually see everything. So we can play around and see what really works. Okay, so save that. And there we go. So we have our circle that we created. You notice that we can keep going and say dot attribute, right? Fill, color is going to be blue. Save that. Look at that. Very easy. So now we can use the SVG object. It is an object. Why? Because we went through Canvas, which has the d3.select. So we selected our div element in our HTML. And then we pass it on to SVG, but we went and appended. So we added an SVG element inside. And the moment we added, we said we want the width to be 500 and the attribute height also to be 250 units. So we created our canvas with these dimensions, and now we are saying we want to append something to our canvas. So essentially, it's exactly what we did before. And if you go back down here and you look at how things are laid out inside of our div, it is exactly what we've done before. We've seen that. So we created our canvas, put all the attributes, and then inside we created a circle, just like that. Very, very easy. Now, you can see this is more scalable of doing and very intuitive as opposed to doing everything in HTML like we did before. Nothing wrong with that, of course, but you can see that now we have more flexibility of doing all sort of things. So what I want you to do now, we created a circle. I want you to create, for instance, a rectangle. Hint, hint is going to be something like rect or rect like this. Okay. All right, go ahead and figure that out and I'll see you in the next video. I have used single quotes and double quotes interchangeably here. Everything still works. Now, it is customary to stick to one style of coding. So if you're just going to use the single quotes, just do that. If you want to use the double quotes, do that also. But this is usually not a good idea. So what I'm going to do here, because I tend to use double quotes all the time, so I'm going to change this also to double quotes like that. The other thing you notice is that I put here a number 50. And I didn't put that as a string, meaning it wasn't inside of double quotes. And yet everything still seems to work just fine. Now you may say, okay, what happens if I get rid of this 100 or get rid of this quotes there? Double quotes, does it still work? Yep, still works. If I get rid of these other ones there as well, is it going to still work? Let's see. Yep. It still works. So the moral of the story here is that when you actually add those attributes, in this case here, you can either just put them as the full numbers or put them inside of quotes. To me, it seems like because JavaScript is so smart per se, and also the library D3, it knows how to decode whatever you're writing here. However, if it comes, for instance, if I want to say, I want to put in terms of percentages, if I say 12% like that, made it really small, that's why we can't see everything. Let's maybe put 56% like this, and there we go. Everything, you can see everything. Let me make this part smaller. There we go. However, if I remove the quotes in that case, what do you think is going to happen? Right, it's not going to work. If you save, we're going to have some problems. So anytime that you actually want to put something appending the number, say 56%, I would recommend, for obvious reasons, to put, in this case, inside of quotes so that the engine knows that you're talking about percentage, because we have that percentage sign there. But any other number that you are adding here, for instance, what was I say? 400, is that what it said here? Doesn't matter. Save like that. It will still work whether you put inside of quotes or outside of quotes, or just like numbers, as you can see here. Okay, there we go. So that is what I want to point out before we move forward. Just very small things, but I thought it would be a good idea just to let you know. Just in case, for those of you who are have a very keen eye, this will satisfy your curiosity. All right, so we have here our circle. Let's go ahead and create another one here, which would be SVG. Again, I'm going to create a append, and we want to append a rectangle. So you say rect like this, and like we did before, we can go ahead and say dot, pass an attribute, and I want, for instance, the width to be about 200. Okay, dot ATR, and I want the height of it to be about 250. How about that? Okay, let's go ahead and save. You can see, there we go. It's pretty big because the width is too much. I'm going to go ahead and say 100 just to see what's going to happen. There we go. So now we have these two there. Very nice indeed. What if we want to also add the attribute of the X and Y coordinate? Because remember, we still have this option of telling exactly how things will be drawn on our canvas. So we can keep going here, right? In fact, let's go back and get rid of that semicolon there. Say dot attribute. I'm going to say the attribute X. I want it to start drawing from where? Let's see, about 50. Okay. And attribute for Y coordinate, I want it to be also about 50 there. Save. You can see now things have changed. Okay, let's go ahead and make this smaller. Let's say width, I want width to about 10 and that height to be about 50. Save and see what happens. All right, so there we go. That's much better because it was too big. It was pushing everything over to the side, meaning this circle, we weren't able to see it. So we have now our rectangle that we created, and we said we want the X to be, remember again, 0, 0 coordinate, it's about there. So we say we want go 50 to the right, we went all the way 50 to there, and then it's going to be 50 to the bottom. So it's going to be 50 to the bottom. That's why it's starting right about there to draw it. So if you want to make this to more to the right, so X to the right this way, you would know that you could add 150 as such, and you can see it went all the way to the right. If you want to put it down here, how about another 150? Save, and it's going to be down there. All right. I'm going to go back to about 80, like that. Very good. And you can do the same thing, right? Like we did before. Go attributes again. I can say fill dash color, and I want to say I want it to be green. Let's see, it should be fill just like that. Save, there we go. We have there, that is green. Very good, so we're able to create a rectangle. We can also go ahead and create a line, right? So these are kind of the most primitive shapes. So I'm going to go ahead and say SVG like that. I'm going to say append again, and I'm going to say line as such. I'm going to say attribute. So the first attribute we're going to pass for a line, we have to pass x1. I'm going to say, for instance, 129. These are just random numbers. Attribute, I'm going to pass x2. Let's give this 45. That attra again, the same thing. So y2 or y1, 300. Attra, y2, say 46. And I'm going to say also add another attribute here, which is going to be stroke. Right? So that's the color that is going to be filled, right? And I'm going to say this is going to be gray. Save that. And you can see there is our line. So let's change this y to about 100. If you save that, you can see now the height of it is also changed. So this is how you create these very primitive SVG shapes. So we start with circle, we have rectangle, and we have line. Now, again, one thing you can do to look at other attributes that you can add into our Canvas SVG here. Look at this. Going back to our SVG attributes reference from developer.mozilla.org, if you go to SVG elements, all of these you can actually create, right? From these elements, for instance, let's go to circle, just the simplest one. You can see we have CX, CY, R. Those are inside attributes. Go down here again. If we want to create a line, let's go down. Look, all of these are attributes you can work with. You can see there's an image there we can create. There's paths. There's the line that we just created. Look at that. So it needs X1, Y1, X2, Y2, and the stroke. All of these attributes that you can see here are being added. We add them using JavaScript, using D3 as such. So whenever in doubt, if you want to play around with something, you can look here. There's this path. Again, you can do that as well. Okay, there's so many things you can do. There's the rect that we used before. Again, X0, Y0, and you can even create a rounded corner rectangle. Look at this. By adding RX, that means radius X, like that, okay? So for our rectangle here, so this one is our rectangle. Let's go ahead and see if we can translate this so that it looks something like that, right? So the corners are rounded like that. Well, let's go to, there we go, a rectangle here, enter. I'm going to put it dot, another attribute, and I'm going to say RX, give it 15, attribute, RY is going to be also 15. Let's save that and see what's going to happen. Go down here, and you can see it look very unattractive. Well, the reason why is because we need to follow exactly what they had here. So those the dimensions actually work. So for Y, 0 and X 120. So Y 0 and this 120 they said. There you go. Let's see that. Very good. There we go. Maybe something else we're missing. Height, width 100, height 100. So right, we're going to make sure that it's indeed a square. That makes sense. All right, that should be the end of it. And voila, you can see we have it working. All right, so that's another way for you to practice and see how to create all sort of shapes using this documentation here. So anything that you see inside of this rec SVG element here, that can be translated into what you see here. There we go. That is the beauty of D3 and SVG. All right, the next thing we can add is actually text, right? So to add text with D3, it's very simple. We say SVG again. We're going to use append, and here we're going to say text, just like that, okay? And then we are going to add the actual text. Now, so far for any other shape, we've added the attribute as such, right? But now to add the actual text, we want users to see, we say dot text. So that's one thing to remember, and then we just pass test here. Hello there as such. Once we save that, you can see that we don't see anything in our screen here, okay? Then we go ahead and let's go ahead and inspect inside and see what's going on. Well, as always, we need to do this to make sure everything is great. And we can see we have our text hello there. And as I hover over this, you can see to the top here, you will see what's going to happen. It says text is there, but we can't quite see where it is. That's because we must add the X and Y values for it to know where exactly it's supposed to show. So I'm going to say dot, add another attribute here. Let's put X, let's say 100. And let's go ahead and add dot attribute and pass Y. I want to say 150. Save. And you can see there it is, hello there. So whenever you're adding text, you must add X and Y value. Otherwise, it's going to be really hard for us to see it showing. Like any other element here, we can also add other attributes. Now, one thing to remember here is that even though this looks like a normal text that we would add via HTML and so forth, this is actually not just a normal text. This is still an SVG, meaning if we were to zoom in as much as possible, it would never lose its quality. That's one particular thing that it's important to remember. It looks like just a normal text, but it is indeed an SVG. The other things we can do, we can say .attribute, can add, for instance, a color. We say fill, I want it to be gray. There we go. Very nice. And we can add other attributes too. For instance, I can say .attribute and say font size. Okay, I want to say 123, for instance. Save that. You can see now it became really, really big. Right? It even cut off over there because of our canvas size. Now, there's other things we can do. For instance, let's go ahead and get rid of all of this. At least make sure that all of it is actually from here down there. Let's save this and make this about 12 so that it's not massive, as you can see there. Very good. All right, and I'm going to put an X of 10 so that goes to the left there. Very good. So we can actually see it. And for now, let's get rid of our inspection there. And I'm going to give it a 10 as well. So that goes to the top. Oh, there we go. So we can see it. Hello there. Very good. I'm going to go ahead and copy this. And copy and paste there a few times. So we can take a look at what we can actually do with all of this. So I'm going to change the Y here to 30. And this to 50. Save that. There we go. We have 3 hellos, and I'm going to change the text to just something different. So the first is going to be hello. This is going to be there. Actually, let's see. This should be hello, right? Hello there, James. Save this. You can see differentiation. Now, there are other things we can do with our text. Let's put this way to the right. How about 110? This is going to be 110 and also 110 as such. So it's going to put it to the right there. Very good. So we can actually position our text by adding this attribute. I can say dot attribute. So what I do here, I can say text dash anchor like that. And I can say start. Save. Nothing's going to change, but look at what's going to happen. I'm going to do the same thing to the other, but I'm going to change this to middle. If you save, you can see now it moved to the left. It's now aligned to the middle, meaning the middle of this whole text here used to be all here. Now we went to the left so that the end is now the middle. Okay. So I can do the same thing here to this other one here at the bottom here, and this is going to be to the end. What's going to happen? So this one here is going to go all the way, this end, all the way to the left. Whenever we want to move our text around, position it, we can use text anchor attributes to move things around. Now, this is another way we can actually move text around. And of course, you can do all of these things using CSS, obviously, but I just want to show you the other way of doing this. So I can add stroke here. I can say attribute, stroke. And I can say green, for instance, save. You can see there is that green there, okay? If I change this size to perhaps 23, this is better, 23, and the Y, I'm going to say maybe 80. So that goes down a little bit so you can see everything. You can see that we still have the gray that we say fill. So the stroke is going to be, as you know, the around color of the letters. As you can see here, there's a lot of things that you can do to make your text, position your text to make it different colors, different strokes, different fills, and so forth. Now, these are small bits that I am showing you so that once we are ready to start using in a bigger project, this is no surprise. Now, go ahead and play around with this concept here. Create text, move it around, add size, make sure that the Y and X values are added. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to see anything showing on the screen. So that's very, very important and very crucial. All right, I'll see you next. So we've done a lot of things so far. So we understand the basics on how to create SVGs and put all those elements inside, appending the SVGs into our canvas and so forth. Okay. So back to our app.js, I changed the width to 600 and height to 600. Of course, you can change to whatever else you want, but I just added those two so that way we have a bigger canvas, if you will. Also, please do remember that our view here, our browser here, is zoomed in, meaning that everything you see here is going to be bigger than usual. So yours may look smaller. That's totally fine. The reason why I have bigger is so that you can actually see it better. So now let's go ahead and look at ways in which we can actually dynamically create things. So you see here, I created a data array. This is an array because we have square brackets and we have items inside of it. So an array, of course, has elements. So this will be element at index 0. So everything starts at 0 in JavaScript and increments that way. So this will be index 0, index 1, index 2. Okay. And the length of this will be 3. Again, if you're not familiar with arrays and so forth, you can go back to previous sections where we talked about fundamentals of JavaScript. So we created here our SVG element, which we created inside of our index. We're calling this class div here to create our SVG canvas per se, and we gave it 600 by 600. Let's go ahead and add a rectangle inside. So I'm going to say const rect, right? And I'm going to say SVG. I'm going to append a rectangle like that. If you save this, we should go to elements and we should have the rec inside there. All right. So of course we can go ahead and add a few things inside of a rec. So I can say dot attribute. Now remember, this is for rec. In fact, to make this much better, I'm going to put that in a one line, and then I'm going to use our rect here, say dot attribute. And I'm going to say I want the rec attribute to width to have, let's say, 24, and then that attribute again. Height, I want it to have about 100. Let's save this, and you can see we have this awesome rectangle bar here. Let's change the color, because why not? That attribute, fill, say orange. Save. We have our orange bar there. Looks really good. Now, because we understand that D3, the whole idea behind it is to create dynamic visualizations, meaning that we should have some sort of data that we're getting, and then we are then using that data to create charts and so forth, or bar charts like this, okay? Now, how do we then add this data that we have at the top here? Because this would be data, right? Because we have 4, 15, and 34. Well, to add data, we just go down here because we said rect.attribute as another attribute. We can just say dot data, and we have to pass the data array. So whatever data that we are creating, or we have created, or we got, we pass it that way. So now we're saying that this rect here, as one of the attributes, in this case is data, is going to have data array. Now, for us to be able to go through and actually get this data here that we added, which has been passed into our data method there, we can do the following. I can, for instance, come down here and say dot attribute again, and I want to say x, and I can say x, for instance, let's give it about 15. If you save, this should go to the right a little bit, as you saw there. But we can dynamically change that x value. To do that, we pass in a function. This is indeed an anonymous function because it doesn't have necessarily a name, as you can see there. And then we are going to say return. I'm going to put a semicolon there so I don't forget. And we can return something. Because we are passing a function, and this rec, we pass here a data method, which in turn has data array. In this function here, it will know that we can pass D and I. What is this? What is a D? What is it I? Well, D stands for data. Of course, you can call this whatever you want. You could have called this Charlie or Paul, whatever you want. But it's customary to add D for data, represented data, which means it's going to be the data that we added here. Okay, and the I, because we know that everything that is added as data type is going to be some sort of an object, an array format, which means now we have the index. So if I go here and I want to make sure that every time the attribute x is computed, we're going to return this value here. What value do you want to return? Let's just go ahead and return, let's say 90. See what's going to happen. Save. And all of a sudden you saw it moved 90 units to the right. That means now I can go ahead and, for instance, say I want to return D times, for instance, let's say 20. If you save, you notice it went back to the left, right? Because D times 20, what is D at this point? Well, let's go ahead and say log to console that out, say D like that, save. And we're going to open, of course, our inspector here, inspect, and go to console. It says 4. That means it went ahead and got number 4, which is the first element inside of our array. So now we're dynamically getting data and do something to it. And in this case here, we are returning D, which is 4 times 20. So each time is going to pass in 80 here, right? Because 4 times 20 is 80, which means it's going to be for our X. That's the reason why it moved to the right or left, depending on the unit that we pass here, right? We can do the same here. I can say attribute again for the X, actually Y coordinate, I should say. And I'm going to pass in a function. So anytime I'm going to pass D and I. We haven't used I yet. That's fine. And I'm going to say return. I want to say return D times 12. Forgot a comma there to separate the values. Okay. If we save now, look at that. It moved down. Again, if I say, let me put this in the second line so it's more visible for all of us. There we go, and perhaps look at it like that. So if I come down here and say log and console like this, and I say D again, save, it's going to show 4, 4. So it goes ahead and gets the first element in there, okay? Now, what would I give us? Let's put an I here and save. It's going to give us 0. Why is it 0? Well, because it's saying now the D is the data and the I is the index. So the first element, of course, is going to be on index 0. That's the reason why we're getting 0 when we console log I. Very nice. So that means now we're starting to combine data with our attributes, with our elements that we can put on the screen. So you can start imagining now, if we have a more complex data array here, or even an object data array, we can do all sort of things so that now the data that's been added is influencing the way things are being shown on the screen. Okay? I hope you're starting to see the power of what we're going to be doing here. So this is the beginning of a very crucial journey that will allow us to start seeing things happening on the screen. Very good. So we'll continue working on this so we can see other capabilities as we add data to our project. All right, so at this point you may be asking, all right, this is great. But every time we run this, we're actually attaching the first element of this array, and we can never really get to the second and or third. Well, the reason why is because we've only appended one rectangle. This one rectangle element is attached to the first element of our data array. How do we then dynamically allow to create, for instance, if we want to create 3 rectangles, right? For instance, if you want to go through all of these items and add them to different bars or different rectangles, as you saw here. Okay, let's start by using the hard-coded method. So what we're going to do here, remember the append, it appends later once the HTML is run, right? Because as you see, the SVG here, we don't have SVG inside our canvas. It's empty. So what I'm going to do here, just to make things a little bit easier, so you can see, I'm going to comment this out here real quick. And what I'm going to do instead, I'm going to say const SVG again. So essentially the same. I'm going to say canvas dot select. Okay, what am I selecting? I'm going to go ahead and select, in this case, SVG. Very good. So we haven't created SVG yet. I'm going to come down here and say SVG. There we go. We have our SVG canvas there. Okay, so we're selecting it. Notice we are just selecting what is already added. Once we have selected, of course, we're going to have problems here because now everything is not working correctly. So what I'm going to do next is, now we have our SVG. I'm going to say rect. Inside of our HTML, inside of our SVG, we're going to go ahead and add a rectangle like this. Say rect. There we go. So we have our SVG and our rectangle. And the beauty here is that, let me save this. So the beauty here now, you can see it's still working. Now it's showing because we added that rectangle inside, which we've been doing by doing the append. Okay, so we went ahead and got SVG, and now we appended the rect. Now this rect here that is being appended, it's not necessarily the rectangle that we added here. In fact, if we go down here to our class canvas, we're going to see that we have SVG, and you notice we have two rects. So this is the one that we added in our HTML, this one here, and this is the one that we are appending at the bottom here. So we say SVG append rect. So what we want to do actually is different for now, so I can show you what's going on. I'm going to comment this out as well. If you save, notice that it's going to break, nothing's going to show. That's totally fine. So now what we're going to do, I'm going to say const rect. I'm going to say svg dot select. What am I going to select? Rect. Save and look. It goes back and adds it back. Now, if we go down here in our div, you notice we only should have one rect. There we go, which is this one here. Let me make this a little bit so you can see, right? 24, orange, height, X, Y. Very good. So now, instead of appending an extra, we're just selecting what we already added here. Now, the cool thing is I can also add more rectangles. Say rect like this. I'm going to copy that. So we have 3 of them now. If you save this, and you will see that we should still have one that's been created. The other ones are not being selected. Why is that? Well, the reason why is because here we said select just one. So what happens now, SVG, our D3, goes along and selects the first that it's found. In fact, if we go down here and let's say I want to console log, let's console log here at the bottom, and I'm going to say rect. Save. Let's see what's going to happen. Let's go to console. You notice we have this selection here. The selection is the object that contains our rectangle. But you notice that we have this groups parents. Do not worry about that. So we have a few objects here, but the one we were very interested in is the actual first one. So groups here, notice that we have this rect, which is first one, rect, right? There's just one. And we probe in inside and go down to find where the data property is, or attribute. It takes a little bit. And there we go. There's this data property. It says 4. What is this for? Well, the 4 is indeed this first item in our data array. So that's the reason why we only seeing one that is selected. If we go to our elements, SVG, we notice one is the one, there's just only one selected. Now, how do we select others as well? Well, we just go ahead here and say select all. Now, if you save this, you will see, let's see what's happening here. Let's go ahead to canvas, SVG. Aha, notice what happens now. It seems it went ahead and got all of them. All of them now are selected and they are added all of the attributes, so the width and everything. So all of these is now happening because we say select all from our HTML. And we manually created this, all of these rects inside of SVG. Now you may say, okay, it seems like there's 3 that are being shown, but I only see 1 here. What's going on? So if we go to console here, now you can see it says 0, 1, 2. These are the index. Why are they showing? Is because we said we want to show them in this log here. Let's get rid of this for now. And here I'm just going to go ahead and pass D, save. All right, you can see 4, 15, 34. And if you click on selection now, you can see that our groups already has node list 3, which means it's now looking at all of the SVG's rectangles that we created there. Okay, so that is what's happening. And if we go in, let's probe in. So first group, node list of 3, there's 3 rectangles here. And you can see that all of them are showing. Now, the problem that you can't see is because the X values are really big. In fact, for the X, let's change, instead of times 10, let's just multiply, say actually I times 10. Save. Well, look at that. Now you can see 1, 2, 3. Still not. Let's perhaps say 20 and see what's going to happen. Okay, still nothing. Now, let's be a little bit smart about this. So we know that X value is what actually makes things move left or right? The X coordinate. So what I'm going to do here is for D, in fact, I'm going to just get rid of the Y here. Get rid of the Y, so everything is going to be in the same axis in the Y, okay? Looks like one giant block there. That's totally fine. Let's be smart a little bit here. So we know the X is going to be width. So we want to make sure we know that width is 24 for our rectangles, right? So we want to add another 24 times I. What does that do is the following. Every time it hits X here, it's going to go ahead and say, okay, I'm going to return a value for X, which means the horizontal displacement, left or right, okay, for each item that I'm going to be showing on the screen. In this case, for each bar, okay? Now, at first time, it's going to be 0 because I, remember, is the index. And what we're doing here, multiplying 24, that means the first time it's going to be 0. So the first item that's going to show is going to have X what? 0, because 24 times 0 is 0, which means the X is going to be somewhere at the 0 X value. The second time is going to be 1, so that means 24. So it's going to show the 24 width bar and add another probably 24 to the right before it puts another 1. Okay, so if you save this, we're going to see a little bit different. There we go. It changed a little bit, but still no problem. That means now we are really putting everything together because remember, the width for each one is going to be 24. That means after the 24, the width, let's say this is going to be 24, we're going to start from that 24 and add another one. That's the reason why you don't see the gap. So to see the gap, we're going to multiply by maybe add 2 or so. You're going to see a little gap happening. Still nothing. Let's say 25. Because that was a smaller number. Aha. Now you can see that gap. Right? Because we know saying each time it goes through and create one of these rectangles, one of these bars, we want to create the next one a little bit to the right, depending on the index of the item we're trying to add. That's why we have this gap there. Meaning, again, we'll repeat this because this could be a little bit confusing. 0 times 25 is going to be 0. So let's assume this is being shown here. So we put the whole rectangle at 0 here, okay? The next time is going to be 1. That means we are going to this 15 here, right? The second one. So it's going to be 1. What is going to happen with 1? Well, with 1, what's going to happen is we are going to multiply 1 times 25. So it's 25. So it's going to start 25 pixels from 0. So we're going to go, this is 24. And it's going to add a little 1 pixel over, as you can see there, and create the second one. The second one is going to be what? 2. 2 times 25 is 50. So starts from 0 here again, goes 24, another 25, and gives a little bit more and goes so far. Now you can see we are seeing all of those 3 there. Very good. Now, the cool thing is, now that we understand this, for the height, we can do the same. Or maybe a little bit different. Let's put a function here back, right? And I'm going to pass D and I, okay? By the way, you don't have to pass I. In this case, I can get rid of I there and it still works. In this case here, I'm just going to say for height, I want to return, what is it that I want to return? Well, I want to return D. So if you save this, look at this. Now we have this very upside down graphic that is showing there. In fact, if I want to give it a multiplier so it gets a little bit bigger, I can say times 2 like that. So this gets a little bit bigger, so we can see that. When we start talking about scales and all this stuff, we will see how to make all of this look much better, as well as make it so that it's not inverted like this. Now, the reason this is looking like this, right, inverted, is because, as we said before, everything in computer graphics, everything that is put on our browser starts from the top 0, 0 left there, right? Because the axis starts from here. That's why it starts from there as well. We will learn how to change this behavior so that it actually looks the way we want, which is the opposite of this, the inverse of this, right? So we turn it around so it starts from here and up like this. Now you may ask, okay, why is it that D3 doesn't give that capability to us right away? Well, the reason being is because it wants to give us, the developers, the power to do so, to change things around the axis and so forth. It may be a pain if you look at it in those terms, but in a way it's a blessing in disguise because then we have the power to do whatever we want. There we go. So we have created here 3 bars separated. Beauty here is all of these are with data array. So now we are dynamically creating things, creating elements in our SVG using data. So what I want you to do is play around with this concept, change some numbers here and see what happens. And also remember that we had to add all of this manually. So in the next video, I'm going to show you how to not rely on adding this manually, because the idea here is the following. We could get a data array that is way bigger than this. In fact, we may not know how many items we have in our data array, in our data source per se. So we want to make sure that all of this happens dynamically instead of us having to select the rectangles which we have created here manually and so forth. I'm going to show you how to do all of that manually. So to change the way this looks, right, because we said that this is inverted. So what we're going to do, we're just going to move this around so that we can actually see it the way we usually see graphs, right? Because this is kind of inverted upside down. There are better ways to do this, but for now, what we're going to do, we're going to kind of brute force it a little bit. So what I'm going to do here, because we want to make sure that the Y is inverted, meaning that instead of the way computer graphics dictates how things should work with Y or how things should be positioned, we're gonna brute force it so that everything is the opposite, meaning now we're gonna have something like this, like a normal graph. Okay, to do that, let's look at the attribute Y. So attribute Y. So what I'm gonna do here, I'm gonna also create a function, an anonymous function, because we want to get everything dynamic, an I as such. So we're going to say 100, let's say 100, okay? I'm going to subtract that by the height of our rectangle. So I'm going to just say the same thing we had here at the top, t times 2. So this is what's going to be returned like that. Okay, so save this, and we should see now it looks much better. So we have inverted, or we've moved things around a little bit so that it looks like something we would look at as a graph. All right, so if I want to make this a little bit bigger, of course, I always have to make sure that the multiplier is the same for the height, because that's what we're subtracting and getting rid of it as we shift things around so it looks good. Save now. So it's just going to make it a little bit bigger. There we go. And remember again, I am zoomed in. So for you, you should see something pretty much like this. That's 100%. Okay, so I'm way zoomed in so that we can actually see what's going on. Very good. So now things look pretty decent. Before we did all of this, you can see that we were appending our rectangles and we're even appending our SVG, meaning we were not adding it as we did here manually or hard-coded in our DOM HTML. And we said also at this point, everything works fine because we added 3 rectangles. But this is not the best way to do this because, like we said also before, this data array could be more than 3 items or 100 or even 1,000,000 items that are inside of our data array, data source. In that case, that would mean that every time we get our data array, we would have to know exactly how many items are there, and then we have to come here and add rectangle 1, 2, 3, and 1,000,000 other rectangles. This is not obviously the best way to do this because the idea is to make everything automatic and dynamically, meaning that we would not need to know in advance the length of our data array or our data source in order for us to predict how many items we have to add or how many rects elements we have to add inside of our SVG. So how do we do all of that actually? How do we make it all work? Well, first of all, let me go ahead and get rid of all those 3 here. You should imagine already what's going to happen. Then this happens, right? So it goes ahead and shows just 1 bar here. And you can see 4 is because it's going and getting the first data point 4 in our array. Now, if we open here, we can say the selection. We can say group node list. If you open there, you can say node list. It only has 1 item that has been selected. If we go back here, we are selecting all, but we go to index, there's just 1 item there, okay? So how do we enter or how do we add, how do we append other recs or anything else we want? In this case, it's gonna be other recs inside of our DOM without having to manually add that. To do that, we need to understand this concept called enter selection. What is this thing? Well, the enter selection is a very simple concept. So if we look at the way things are right now, we went to the DOM, we add rect 1, rect 2. And then we're mapping with that array 5 and 13. So this 5 is going to map with the first rectangle, 13 with the second rectangle. However, if we have more items in our data array, there's going to be a way in which we can actually access the DOM and say, hey, we must add another rectangles so that we can map to the data that we have here without having to go manually and add those. So luckily, there is this enter selection element or object that is set for us to do that, which means we'll have to actually invoke the enter method, which will tell the browser to reserve in the DOM virtual elements. So there will be other elements that are quote unquote hidden, ready to be added as we need them. For this to happen, for this to be reserved, we have to use the enter selection. Let's go ahead and see how we can do that. Well, I'm going to get rid of all other ones like we did before and just keep one there. And when we go to our app here, what we can do now is the moment we add our data, I can go ahead and say dot enter, right? And I'm going to go ahead and append something. What is it I want to append? Well, I want to append a rect like that. Let's save this and see what's going to happen. If you save, let's go ahead and open and see. So nothing is happening there because let's move this attribute outside so that we can add that afterwards, right? Because we pass in data first, and then we enter, and then we start putting together all of the attributes. I think this will be better. There we go. Now we see only 2. Okay, let's go to our elements and see what's going to happen. Because we say data, we pass the data, and then we enter, meaning that we're now trying to say, okay, we're going to enter that selection, that exclusive club, if you will, that has all of these virtual elements there waiting for us to use them to add just in case they're needed. And we can say, okay, once we enter, then we are adding a rectangle, appending one, and then we do all sort of things. But you notice there's only 2 that are showing here. Okay, what's going on? Let's go to elements here. SVG. It looks like it creates 2 and there is one that is just empty. What is that? Well, that is because we have one that we created here, which is empty. So if we get rid of that and save, and voila, now you see all of them. Now let's look closely and see what's going on here. Let's open back here. So we created our rect and we select all rectangles there. But you may say, well, but there's none because we haven't done anything here yet. That is totally fine because D3 knows exactly what's happening in the back. This will actually be reserved until we get to enter. Once we get to enter, it says, all right, so we need to make sure that we have those virtual elements that are waiting there to be added, and we append the rect. And then we're selecting all the rectangles, and then we're adding all these attributes. Hence, you're able to see this working now, okay? Now, this may be a little bit weird at first because you say, well, we're selecting all before we even have created any. That's true, because again, we don't have rects inside here. But D3 knows exactly how to manipulate the DOM so that it knows to reserve the select all after we have appended something inside of it. Because now, check this out. Because I have this way, I'm not tied down with HTML, meaning I don't have to come here and add a rect anymore. I could if I wanted to, but I don't have to. Because now I can come here and add, for instance, 123, another item, and save. Ah, look at this. That's the problem. Has to be comma there. Let's save. Look at that. It went ahead and got that other one. Okay. And I can keep going. Let's see. I want to add 23. There we go. Now you can see we have a problem here because these 34 and 23, they're kind of the same height. Well, we can change that by coming down here. Let's see, height, and put it 2 again. Make sure to come and change here as well. Otherwise, you're going to have issues. And save. You can see now it's way better. Okay. The reason why we are hitting the ceiling here is because it can't go any further than that, right? That's the reason why we will see how to use scales and all sort of things at a later time. So we can make sure that we have better ranges so we can see everything working. Look at this. Now, I don't even have to know what is it that I'm receiving as a data, right? Because I can keep adding here. I can even put 0. Put 0. What's going to happen? It's not going to show anything, but it is indeed showing because 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, we should have 6 elements inside of our SVG. Look at that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If you hover over, it tells you exactly what's going on. It says 25 of width, or 24 width, and height is 0 because we added 0. And all of this data, remember, is being actually dynamically added into height and to also X and so forth. Very cool. Now we have made sure that every time our data comes in, we don't have to manually go and add directs ourselves because we're using the enter selection here. This is a very important concept, okay? Just remember, it's a virtual elements that are waiting for us to actually add something to it, which will decouple us from having to come down here and add recs ourselves. So now this is more dynamic, which is exactly what we want. What I want you to do now is to add more data, more numbers here as you want, and see all of these working, right? They should all show there. The other thing you can do is you can add different colors. Now, this is going to be a little challenge because anytime we want to dynamically change data, we pass in a function as such, right? For the height, we pass in function d, and then we'll multiply the data that we're getting from where? Our data array, and multiply by 2, okay? Now, how about if I wanted to make sure that, for instance, the widths are also random? How would you do that? Well, you put a function like this, and you could pass a d or I, whatever you want, and you can multiply, add a multiplier there, and you can see different kind of shapes. So play around with this concept because I want you to really understand what's going on here. Most importantly, understand the enter selection, which is very crucial for us to understand what's going on. All right, congratulations. I'll see you next. Now that we have our enter selection working, and you notice now we are appending everything really, we can go back to what we had before. So I can go ahead, come up here and uncomment that. And I'm going to go ahead and comment this. Now, if you save, we should have a problem. Why is there a problem? Because now we're appending SVG, but this SVG here is not the one that we are actually using. Let's look at our canvas here. So you should see that we have this empty SVG, which you can see it's showing there. And we have the one that we just created at the top and we appended dynamically, injected, and we can see there. If you open, then you see all of the items that should be seen in our view here. But however, they're not showing, even though when you go ahead and hover over, you can see all of them actually there. Why aren't they showing? For obvious reasons. We have this SVG. So we have two of them that are doing two different things, right? So the thing we need to do here is just come down here and get rid of this because now it's just going to append one and there is only one that will go ahead and be connected and show everything that we can see right now. So coming down here again, you can see SVG 600. And if you open inside, then we have all of these. Now, all of these items here are all dynamic now, folks. They're all dynamic, which is awesome. All right, so there we go. We can clean up our code a little bit. In fact, we can just go get rid of all of this and voila. Now we have perfect code. All right, so you see here we have our data array. This is wonderful. It's fine and all, but let's make our data array here to be actually a little bit more meaningful, meaning that we can actually pass objects right here that have more values, more information for us to actually create our visualizations here. What I mean by that is the following. Instead of having those numbers, in fact, let me go ahead and comment all of that out there. I'm going to say var again, data array, and I'm going to just create an array which will have objects. So to create an object, of course, we create curly braces like that, and then we can put all the properties inside. So the first property I'm going to add, for instance, I can say width. It's going to have 25 like that. Say height is going to be 4, and I can say fill as a property of this object. Let's say I want it to be pink like that, and I'm going to copy this a few times and paste that, say comma there, like this, and change a few values here. So width, I'm going to keep width the same, and heights, I'm going to change this 14, something like this. Okay, so very diverse, and this is going to be purple, and let's keep this orange. And this one here, green. And we're going to say this is gray. Very good. So now we have that. That means we have an object. We have an array that contains objects. So in this case here, because it's an object, we're going to have an error because it's going to say attribute is not a number because we've changed our data, right? Because now it can't extract those values that we have passing here. So this data here, D, because it's not just an array, it is an object. That means I will have to do the following. To get the height, I have to say D dot height, right? Because I'm accessing what is inside of our array. So D dot height is going to get the height of our bar or graph. So I'm going to have to do the same. Let's see here where whatever we have a D, I'm going to say D dot height as well, like that. Save. Voila. Beautiful. So we did a few changes there, and now we have all this greatness. Now, notice also, because we are console logging D as the data, it gives us the data, right? Look at this. That means we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 items inside of our data. Is that true? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 items inside of our data array, which is an array because we have square brackets, and inside we have objects. So this is object number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And it has all of them there. So we can open inside, you can see, has fill pink, height 4, width 25. Now, we're still not getting the colors. The pink property here is not being read. What we need to do, we just have to come here. Instead of hard coding this, look at this. I can do the same, say function, like this. I'm going to say return. And what am I returning? Well, let's pass D here. No need to pass the I. I want to return D dot fill. Save. Look at this. And just like that, all of our bars, our graph bars here, are showing with different colors. Because each time we go around, it goes and fetches the correct color. So for the first object, gets the width, the height, and the fill is pink. Is that true? There we go, it's pink. And the second is purple. Let's have purple there. Let's probably put this there. Third one, orange, green, and gray. So if I come down here and copy this and create another object here, and I'm going to say the height is 32. Okay, and red. Look at this. Save, and voila. Just like that. Very good. So we didn't have to do a lot of work. We just had to change a few things. But now we have this capability of accessing our data array, and inside get all the properties of each object and plot everything on the screen, as you can see here. Very good. So what other properties can you add for each object here? Think of them, and then try to add those properties dynamically inside of our rect, like we did here. Now you have a lot of knowledge to be very dangerous. Go ahead and figure out ways in which you can better our code here or add other properties and make it really, really nice. Remember, because this is a rectangle, you can actually go and add a radius around the corners. Things you can do, because these are just rectangles, right? We can go ahead here and say dot, add another attribute, and keep going. All right, go ahead and figure that out and play around with this concept, and I will see you in the next video. So we've learned how to put things into perspective here by getting data and automatically or dynamically creating shapes according to our data that we're passing. So this is great. However, it's not every day that we actually have to type all this data ourselves and then create all these bars or any other form of SVG elements on the screen, right? Because the idea is to be able to get data from somewhere and perhaps parse it through so we can then create our graphs and so forth. So the first concept that we need to talk about here real quick is the concept of JSON. JSON is another format of data that is wildly available everywhere that makes all of the data look like this. So this would be a JSON. In fact, JSON, let me write it here. JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation. Interesting. JavaScript, put a T there, object notation. What that means is that this way of putting together pieces of data is actually inspired by JavaScript. Why is that? Well, that means now the way we created this data array here, this would be considered also a JSON per se, right? Because it's a JavaScript object notation. So this would be an object in JavaScript. We have here width, height, and fill, which are the properties or attributes of our JSON. JSON is the most preferred and most used way of transmitting and receiving data online. In fact, here is an example of a JSON. If you go to jsonplaceholder.typecode.com, you will see here you can find an API. Think of an API as just an external way in which we can actually tap in some URL and get information or data. So you can see this would be an API. This would be a JSON API, as you can see, because it gives us this notation. Remember, which is exactly, few changes there, the same notation you can see here. Although the indentation and the way things are broken down here may look different, right? But it is the same. If I come down here and do like this, put everything in a different line, and voila, you notice that we have indeed a JSON notation just like this here, right? Because we have these braces, which means this is indeed one object which is inside of an array. Very great. So this here is what a JSON is. Now, like I said, an API allows us developers to be able to go and fetch data on a remote server that has all the things that we don't even have to know, that allows us to tap into their databases and everything that they have going on there. For example, here what's happening, we are tapping into this URL, which will then return something that we see here, which is a JSON. Now we're using here a very important topic in JavaScript, which is the promise. Now, the idea here is whenever we are tapping into something unknown, in this case, the world of internet would be unknown to us. So if you're creating our application here and we want to get to this URL so that we can receive and return a JSON, that would be what we call unknown territory, meaning we don't know what's going to happen because we are asking for something remotely, something that we don't know if it's going to work out or not. That's when we use promises. It can be a little bit complicated topic in the beginning, but it's not. Just think of a promise, this then here, as a way of us saying, okay, go ahead and knock at this door here, this URL, and wait to get a response from this server to make sure that we are ready then to get that information in form of response, and then we can then go probing and get information, the actual JSON piece of data. That's why we get this. Okay. Now you also notice this may be a little bit complicated at first. This is what we call arrow function. This could be written as follows. This here, this piece of code, we have the arrow function, is the same as what we did here. In fact, what I can do here, I can just get rid of this function like that, have a D, because I'm returning something. I'm going to put arrow function like this, and I don't need to put the return, which means I don't need to add that as well, and there we go. So what is this? If you hover over, it tells you that is our parameter. That means now this is an arrow function. If you hover over even, it tells you exactly what it is, right? It's an arrow function, so it's a function which has D as the parameter and returns it. So this is the same thing as we have down here. You notice now this is a better way of doing this because it is clean and it doesn't require a lot of work. Now you can use this way here as we've been using. In fact, you should use this way whenever you have more than one line of code inside. So if I want to say var a is equal to 10 of some sort, this way wouldn't work, right? Because we have more than one line inside of our function. So you would then need to use this way. The other thing too about arrow function is that this, of course, the D is a parameter. As you hover over, you can see it says a parameter of type D, of type any, that should say, meaning it could be any object. Now, if we want to add more parameters, for instance, I, then this is what you would do. You put parentheses and put D, comma, I, just like what we do here, but now we don't have the function. Okay, so you can see this is really nice and clean. These are called arrow functions. In fact, if you save this, everything still works just fine. I'll leave it this way so that you have that example as well. But of course, like I said, you'll find me probably using this more often than I use this notation here. But either way, it works. Okay, I may do this interchangeably. Sometimes I may use this way, other times just go with arrow functions. Very good. Now, going back to what we're saying here. So we have our JSON. We talked a little bit about promises and everything. Now, let's figure out how to do this. Now, this URL can be used right away for us to test things out. I'm going to take this URL here because it says here that if we tap into this URL, we should get this JSON payload here like that, right? So let's copy this and see how can we then get this JSON data, parse it, and do all the work. Now, the beauty here is that with D3, we don't have to do a lot of work to be able to parse through and get this actual data. Why? Because D3 has this method called JSON that we can use. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to go say d3.json and hit enter. The moment you hit enter, because we have that plugin or extension that allows completion, in fact, it added 2 D3s there. Let's get rid of that. And gives us this .json, and we have to pass the actual URL where we want to get JSON. I'm going to say pass it all in like that. That's totally fine. And then we have this function here. Now, here I could go ahead and, of course, add the code and everything will look great. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to change these actually. So let's get rid of all of this. Instead, I'm going to use the then that you saw the promise. So I'm going to say dot then, and inside here, I'm going to use arrow function. I'm going to say data, arrow function like that, and then I'm going to give it a body like this, right? Because there's more things I would want to enter or add there. In fact, I can put this at the bottom here so we have more space. We can see everything, okay? So we have, again, remember, this is arrow functions. We have data. This is the payload that we're going to be getting. In this case, we'll have this information here, JSON format. Let's see if that's true. I'm going to just say log and say data like that. See what we're going to get. Save. Everything is running. And there we go. User ID, 1. Title, Deluctus Autumn, completed false. And that's exactly what we have here. Very good. Look how simple that is. Now, that means if I want, just like any object, because remember, this is called JSON for a reason, because it's JavaScript object notation to facilitate our lives. This should tell us a lot about JavaScript, right? Because if there is indeed a way of sending and receiving data that is named after JavaScript, you can tell how popular JavaScript really is. Okay, so in this case here, if we want to go to user ID or get the item of this field user ID, we can do the same, right? We can go ahead here, say data dot user ID. Of course, it has to be the name, exact name of our property there. If you save, we should be able to see 1. Why? Because our user ID is 1. Let's get title. I'm going to copy that. V there, get that element or field. We should see Deluctus Autumn. Okay, very good. So there we go. We are able to write like that, get JSON and everything. Now, again, the reason why we're using this promise then here, it's because this will make sure to wait until we actually get the data before we do code here to actually draw elements on screen. Okay, that's why everything we are going to be doing once we get the data, it's going to be below here inside of our then promise there. Also, JSON is not the only data format that is allowed with D3. D3 allows CSV, which stands for comma separated values, and many, many other types of data. But usually JSON is the most popular one and easy to work with. Now, in this case here, we are getting this information from this URL, from this API. We could also have gotten this information from a file inside here. In fact, I can go ahead and create a new file here. Let's call this test.json. Notice now we have to say .json to say this file here is going to contain JSON objects, right? Just like we have index.html, JS, and so forth. And I can come down here. In fact, come down here and copy this input right there. Look at that. Now it is indeed a JSON as well. If I save that and I come down here and change this, instead of wanting to go to this URL, I can pass what? Text.json. Also notice that text.json has to be exactly the same name and also in the same directory. That's why we can just go straight and say text.json like that. Let's save this. You notice we get the same information. In fact, I can just go ahead and retrieve the whole data. And there we go. User, completed, ID, and all of those properties there. The only difference now is that we are getting it from our project text.json. That means now we can actually take this data here. I'm going to copy all of this just to give you a little and get rid of all of this. Say V. Now, because it's JSON here, we need to put that inside of brackets like that, double quotes. Take a seconds here. I'll do this real quick. There we go. So I've made a few changes here, added all of the double quotes there so that we know these are fields. Because remember, this is JSON, it's not a JS file. Okay. Don't worry about this formatting here because it's pretty much the same as everything else. It's just that this is all in one line. This is in different lines. Okay. I just wanted to make a point earlier. So now what we can do, if we go back down here and comment this out here, okay, so I can show you real quick. Inside of our D3JSON here, like I said before, everything that pertains to showing our user interface here, we must put inside of here. So let me close down this. So this means now we can take all of these we have outside here, got it all. I'm going to put inside here. Very good. We lost some indentations here. I'm going to just do this and do a tab. There we go. That looks much better. And this as well. That way you know that this pertains to our rect. All right. There we go. We don't need this anymore. That was just for us to see things. All right. If you save, we're going to have an error here because there are things we need to do. Notice that our console.data is still working because if you open here, it's giving us our JSON. Look at this, fill, height, and width. Why? Because we are indeed calling our text JSON. Okay, even though we commented out our data array. Now, what needs to be done here? So our data array here, we just change it to data like that, right? Because this is the data that will have what? All of these items, all of these objects there. Look, if I save this, let me put this back so you hopefully can see what's going on. Let's go ahead and save this, see what's happening. And voila, we're back in business. As if nothing happened really in terms of the visuals. But we know that now we are getting this JSON here from where? From our text.json. Right? That means if we had this text JSON somewhere else, just like I showed you earlier, right? In a URL or in an API somewhere like we did here, right? That would still work. All we would have to do is just pass the URL where we have our data. As long as our data source is going to confirm with this, it's going to have this kind of JSON. Right? Because it's important because we need the width, we need the fill height, we need height and all those things to get, for instance, that height to get the properties height and so forth. And just like that, we were able to abstract out everything. Now we don't have to use this. We could if you want, we don't have to use it because now we have that in a text file and we can come here and add a few more. Look at this. I can come here, copy this 125 still. How about 100, and I want this to be yellow, a couple more. How about 98, magenta? If that's gonna work, save. Look at that, it's working. This has the same, let's say 90. How about that? There we go. It's totally working. Now, the reason why these are still the same is the same reason we talked earlier. It's because our viewport, where we actually can see things, right? we don't have the scale set up properly. So that means if we come back here, so if we come down here, I want to put 200 so we have a better range. Save that. Now you can see the difference. I'm going to make this perhaps to the bottom. Look at that. You can see now the full range. Very good. And all of that was done more dynamically, meaning that we've compartmentalized our code so that we have our JSON in a different file, and we're calling it using the d3.json, which takes our JSON and parses it through and gives us this data object, okay, which has, as you can see, of course, all of our objects, all of these. Voila. All right, so what I want you to do is to go online and find JSON APIs. Just type JSON free APIs and find as many as you want that will have data that you can play with. Because now you have all the information, all the tools, all the knowledge you need to actually create these bar charts like we did here with real data, okay? Go ahead and do JSON free API and find those API, JSON APIs that you can use to create awesome bar charts like this. All right, I'll see you next.